Thank you for coming to this event, this joint event between the Society of Catholic Scientists and the Parish of Blessed Sacrament of the Diocese of Madison. The local chapter of the Society of Catholic Scientists started very recently, and tonight we have the honor of one of our, I guess, charter members of our chapter to give the talk today, which is very timely, as you can see from the title. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Dr. Timothy Carone, who's a lecturer at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. And let's go on from here, because we're already a bit late.
Thank you very much. I tend to talk softly. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Siri, set timer for 40 minutes.
40 minutes, starting now.
It's my own personal AI. So first of all, thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate it. I'm really excited to give this talk. This is a follow-on of a talk I gave at our Society of Catholic Scientists conference in June, kind of the next step. And what I'm going to talk about is the new AIs that we see out today, the generative AIs, the chat GPTs. Those are the new thing that I think will have a profound impact on our society and culture, as much or even greater than the internet. So what I want to talk about is not just the AIs, but how those AIs augment humans. And this idea of human augmentation, where it's not just the human or the AI, but it's the human and AI together, right? We all have our phones, this all has AI in it. This is the first version of human augmentation. And we'll talk about how that, implications for that, including implications for the Catholic faith and for the Church. And the idea is that these AIs simulate human beings. That's what I mean by the Human Simulacrum. They simulate human beings. They're not human, they're not alive, but they simulate humans. And that's the key thing that has not existed until recently. I'm going to talk about the good and the bad and the ugly. It's one of my favorite phrases I use a lot. The good AI showcases human innovation, creativity, right? Mirroring thought, these systems illuminate intricacies of our creation, drawing parallels with divine artistry. There's a connection between what they can do, what we can get them to do, and the divine. And what's bad about them? Well, evil people can do evil things with AI. And they will, and they have. AI risks pushing society toward what I call latent totalitarianism, in that government's the power of the few over the power of the many. The surveillance potential is particularly insidious, encroaching on our cherished freedoms, challenging moral convictions. And what's ugly? Well, it really, you can see with social media driving social bifurcation and biases. In fact, you'll see in some of my images that I've used AI to create, there is some bias in them. So that's what I want to talk about. Let me be clear about a couple things, though. One is, first of all, I didn't use AI to create this talk. I did use AI to create the images I have in the talk. Okay. Secondly, I'm an optimist. I'm an optimist about the technology and AI. I question the need to regulate them in the way we're talking about today, because that's simply crony capitalism at its finest. Don't believe in terminators. I don't believe in existential threats. I do believe in free markets, innovation, risk-taking, and the ability of AI to augment human intelligence and behavior. The first three have brought billions out of poverty and saved billions of lives. And I think the fourth is just going to accelerate the process. Okay. So, for a long time, AI didn't amount to much. I started using it back in the 80s in grad school, and I went through a lot of pain and suffering. These things, these AI systems we had just weren't working. And we went through a lot of pain and suffering until the generative AI, the AI that we see today, the chat GPTs, Bards, Claudes, those are now the DALL-Es for doing imaging from prompts and Midjourney. We now have AIs where you can simply give us text prompt to get an image, like here. Video, you can write an essay. In fact, I took all of the hundreds of, it turned out to be over 100 PDFs that I had used to develop this talk, handed it to Bard, and Bard rewrote my entire talk for me. It was just curiosity, right? Of course, mine is much better, as you probably well know. But it wasn't too bad. It was interesting. But the idea, and this is really important, that is these AIs can really start to simulate what we do day in, day out. It's not that they have to be robots, but they can write, and they can answer questions, and they can write code. Frankly, I write a lot of code, and I kind of stopped writing code. I let them do it for me. They're much better at it. Okay, I give up. These AIs are much better at writing Python and Rust and a few other languages, R. I still write all of my stuff, right? I refuse to give that up. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but I refuse to have an AI write something for me. Even an email. So, but the other thing too to realize is that we are now in the regime of augmented AI, or human augmentation. This has a lot of AI in it, and we all use it. We all have our own personal phone number that nobody else on the planet has. We all have our own phone, and tell me you don't take this into the bathroom with me. Okay, everybody does. We always have it with us. It always goes everywhere. This is our AI. This is our human simulacrum, and it's only going to get more powerful with time. Okay. So let's talk about what is AI. Okay. So, going back to the 50s, 40s, and 50s, right? AI was supposed to be to try to explore concepts like machine learning, knowledge representation, natural language processing. They wanted machines to exhibit human-like intelligence and behavior. So since day one, we've been trying to achieve what we seem to have finally achieved. Been a lot of ups and downs, but now we have these things called large language models. And they're based on the neural networks in our brains. We've mathematically recreated them, and we use these things for actually creating models and other things, the software that simulates us. So what is the generative AI process? So this is the actual process that all the companies, OpenAI, Microsoft, Facebook, Google, IBM, this is sort of the process that is used. The idea is that at the heart of it is a model in the middle. And that model is really a mathematical organization. It consists of, we call parameters, some will call weights. Those of us who are old would call them coefficients. There's a mathematical representation, and the idea is that this model, the coefficients in the model are created using regression techniques, and to optimize the error associated with the output relative to input. Okay. All this is computational statistics. That's all it is. Nothing fancy. It's a lot more math to it, a lot more steps and so on, but at its heart, it's just regression. Now, in 2017, Google invented something called a transformer. And the transformer was a model, a mathematical model, that actually was quite a leap. And this model is what we use today. Now, interesting enough, Google, they invented it in 2017, but they didn't do anything with it. What we have today, they could have had, 6 years ago. But they kind of, big company, lethargy, didn't do much with it, right? Until some people left Google, started OpenAI, and other companies started using the transformer model. And the transformer model is just a way we back up. So when we try to predict words in a sentence, like I gave it a prompt, right? Our models used to be that they would look at each word in the prompt and then based on each word try to predict the next word. So they really weren't looking at the whole sentence. They were looking at kind of just that, each word and trying to figure out context and predict. With transformer models, they're able to look at the entire prompt, or quite a bit, up to about 32,000 characters, to try to ascertain what should the next word be. And basically what it's doing, it takes your prompt, what's the probability the Yankees win the World Series next year? And it all it does is it continues that prompt. It just starts predicting what should come next. Right? Yankees are guaranteed to win the World Series next year. So it'll continue with your prompt by looking at the entire prompt and not just one word at a time. And that was the big breakthrough, being able to see the context of words relative to words that were farther away in the text. And that's what's called self-attention. And the reason it works, and the key thing is that because it's able to see relationships between these words, it's better understanding relationships between the words. So if you have a long prompt or you have some text to generalize or to summarize, it knows the words at the beginning of the text, how those relate to words at the end. And that, not only does that make it computationally efficient, but it also makes it computationally fast. Now, so that's at the heart. Now, the pre-training piece, so the architecture is the transformer. The pre-training piece you can think about as the process of identifying clusters of specific knowledge, right? And the way I like to think about and explain it is, before you can have an application at the side called ChatGPT, you have to have, say you want to do coding, like one thing I do a lot, I ask it to develop code for me. And so I tell it to act like a coder, knowing, say, Python or Rust or R, right? It takes that, and the model itself will take that information and will generate the code. Now, in order for it to know how to generate code and how to program in Python, it needs to do the pre-training. The pre-training is sort of like a student mastering basics of reading and coding and writing and math, during K through 12 education. So if you want to graduate as a data scientist, you still have to go through K through 12 education before you can get into college and learn how to be a data scientist. So the pre-training piece is more about K through 12. It's about identifying patterns around what we call clusters of knowledge, and using those clusters to create a model. Then, so there's this initial model based on the pre-training that is drawn from data. Now, this data is where the first set of biases start to come in. So the data is largely public domain. It's Wikipedia. It's a lot of sources of books. It's GitHub. GitHub is one of the largest repositories of computer code, source code. Reddit, YouTube, so on. So it uses many hundreds of gigabytes to terabyte of data to create the pre-training model. And this is where the first problem occurs. One is because that data is necessarily a subset of our knowledge, but it's also it doesn't have it has copyrighted materials in it, but not the copyrighted materials we would like to see. Right? There's no theologians, apologists, Catholic philosophers, no copyrighted books from Peter Kreeft are in this corpus that's used to train the models. The Bible is there, but not the fact that the Bible inspired by the Holy Spirit. It's just text. So also during the model development, humans have to make decisions. As the pre-training occurs and the first model is developed, humans are making decisions about how that model should look and act. And their personal biases, that's where they start to come in. The fine-tuning piece is actually where the model becomes specific for a domain. So you've probably heard about, ChatGPT for Bloomberg and for medical uses and for engineering and for AI and other things, for analytics. You start to fine-tune the model itself based on additional data that's specific to that domain. And that's where people can start to create things for a particular industry or domain. It's also a biased process because, again, the changes to this next iteration on the model based on fine-tuning is also biased by humans. They decide how good it is, they decide what goes into it, what's right and wrong. If it's a little too Catholic, they'll back it off and remove that, okay? The API, the application programming interface, that's a simple one. All that's there for is to allow people or applications access to the model. So in applications like ChatGPT, so you go to the OpenAI website, you have ChatGPT opened up, or Bard, you type your prompt in. That's an application. It takes your prompt, uses the API, the programming interface, to send it to the model. The model takes that, predicts the output, and sends it back. All right, and so the application uses the APIs. ChatGPT, the thing you use, is not a model, it's just an interface. It's just the front end. The guardrails are there to obviously prevent things like AI describing how to build a dirty bomb or how to assassinate somebody with common household materials, right? They put these guardrails there to prevent the AI from doing things it shouldn't. And we've seen that when it's come out with output that is offensive to Catholics or others. They've gone back and fixed it. Sometimes they fixed it, sometimes they modified it slightly. These guardrails are clearly an area where bias starts to filter in, the whole humanist bias of a lot of the technologists. This is where it starts to manifest. One other consideration with all this, hopefully this kind of gives you a high-level flyby of exactly how these things work. These things consume an enormous amount of energy. They're huge data centers. Microsoft is actually thinking of putting small nuclear reactors in the data centers that run its generative AI models. That's how much energy they use. And you have to start to think about, well, if it uses that much energy, how's that energy generated? A lot of data centers still powered by oil and coal and natural gas. That starts to become a problem. All right, so that's what AI is. That's what our generative AI is. GPT, by the way, stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. Right? So it generates text. You have pre-training in there to actually build up knowledge, and the transformer is the architecture and methodology of how to actually create the model. So what AI is not, okay? AI is not a Terminator. Okay? It's not alive. You know, people always ask me about this, and one of the examples I use, I say, you know, your car has over 100 CPUs in it, has millions of lines of code, a lot of it is AI code. I said, you look at a new car dealership, has a lot of brand new cars in the parking lot. How come at night they all don't just suddenly start up and decide to take over the world, or at least go destroy the nearest dealership themselves? Why don't they do that? It's because they can't. Right? I mean, self-driving cars are AI data center. They generate 40 terabytes of data in an 8-hour period. But they don't have goals, right? They don't have agency. They're not intelligent. They're not conscious. They're simply a tool. Right? My ChatGPT window can sit there for 30 years. And it won't do anything until I ask it a question. One of the problems too we've encountered, you hear it a lot, is with artificial general intelligence and artificial superintelligence. This is the idea we can create AI which is identical to humans or superior to humans. Now the problem I have with all that, and this is the reason why I use the word simulated, is if somebody comes to me and says, my AI is intelligent, my first question is going to be, so what attributes does it have that tells you it's intelligent? Right? There are none. We don't know. We don't know those attributes. You can't say, oh, it has A, B, and C, therefore it's intelligent. Nobody knows. It's the same with consciousness. We have no idea what consciousness is, and to say, oh yeah, my AI is conscious, it's self-aware, but you can't give me the attributes that tell me that's the case. So I don't think that this whole discussion around AGI and artificial superintelligence and existential risks, I think it's kind of a waste of time. One, we'll never know if AI is actually AGI or ASI, but it doesn't matter, because the dangers of an AGI are achieved with the simulated AGI, which is what we have today, the Human Simulacrum. That's enough to cause problems and dangers for us that we need to be careful about. So what's the good? Well, I've talked a lot about the good. Basically, it's, the idea is that AI, in conjunction with a human, can and should augment human behaviors, human creativity, human innovation. I think we as a species would be much better if each of us had a very effective simulacrum as our partner to help us do whatever we do than on our own. I think that's where we're headed. I think that's a good thing. I think it's consistent with the Catholic intellectual tradition. I think it's consistent with, human participation in God's creation. And I really think it's going to drive significant human flourishing. I really think that having, our version of HAL or data from Star Trek Next Generation is a huge benefit to all of us. And I can go into it further, but I'd like to cover a few other things in the time I have left. I'm going to talk about the bad for a minute. Now, this is where the bias comes in with AI. So I gave it a prompt. I gave DALL-E 3 a prompt about giving me an image about bad AI, and I added some things in. And I don't know if you can see it. That person right there on the right looks an awful lot like Donald Trump. Now, I was like, okay. But then I asked it for a bunch of images to do good AI. There was one image I didn't use. When I asked it for good AI, there were two similar figures in the good AI that looked a lot like President Obama and Hillary Clinton. So I don't know. But let's talk about the bad AI. First of all, evil people are going to do evil things with AI. There's no getting around it. No regulatory framework is going to stop it because AI cannot be brought back in. You can't stop work on it. It's impossible. Get over it. It can't be banned. The one thing I will say about it is there are countries in the world that view AI in a certain way. China has a stated vision for artificial intelligence. It's a publicly stated position. AI is a mechanism for authoritarian population control. All right? That is their stated goal. Russian President Putin stated artificial intelligence is the future, not only for Russia, but for all humankind. It comes with colossal opportunities, but also threats that are difficult to predict. Whoever becomes the leader in this sphere will become the ruler of the world. Russia, China, and their proxies truly believe AI will help them rule the world. There's no getting around that. The question is where does the Catholic Church fit into that? And what are we going to do about it? There's an Italian philosopher, Augusto Del Noce, who I've been reading a lot, who has a lot to say about authoritarian and totalitarian regimes. It's hard to read, but he's very, very effective. Real profound insights into the nature of totalitarianism and the latent risks in the development of AI. Now, he didn't address AI, he didn't know about it, but his writings are relevant. And for him, unchecked proliferation of technology, especially in areas like surveillance, facial recognition, predictive analytics, risks, risk-creating conditions for new technologically enabled totalitarianism. And when we see that, right, we kind of saw that with COVID, right? And we're seeing it with governments and others using technology to clamp down. We saw that with social media. And we're only getting started. I think the most dangerous tendency that Del Noce talked about is AI having recognizes a new form of technological idolatry. Right, so when you think about people like Ray Kurzweil and Yuval Harari, they speak of technology enabling the realization of godlike powers in humans upgrading themselves into immortal transhumans. Transhumans are not augmented humans. I really think transhumanism, where you put technology and humans together and you can try to upload their brains into the cloud and things like this. My question is that a state of permanent mortal sin? And the danger of this sacralization of technology is it takes on a role of like a new secular religion. People depend on it. They want to use it because they give them that control over others and allows them to achieve their outcomes that they want. And the problem is people who don't see this for what it is, right? So Dominic recognized that apparent political freedom could conceal profound internal unfreedom in modern secular societies. Societies can believe that we're progressing in a good way, beyond tyranny, when in fact we're moving directly into tyranny and not realizing it. So technology has to be subordinated to wisdom and virtue, and not the other way around. Now let me mention a few key areas where AI can go bad. And most of these should be familiar. One is just surveillance and monitoring. It's very simple for the US government to control your life by surveilling, monitoring you, and knowing exactly what you're doing, and being able to make changes to your lives to make you coerce you into certain behaviors. We're starting to see that. Especially true if we have central bank digital currencies, which is just programmable money. Predictive policing, we've all heard some horror stories around predictive policing. It's a challenge, but for governments who are fixated on control of their populations, this predictive policing is highly effective. Social credit systems, there are ways of assigning citizen scores based on their behaviors. In China, for example, if you don't have a certain score, you can't get on a train, you can't get on a bus, you can't get on a plane, you can't eat in a restaurant. If they can do it, we can do it. The question is what prevents us from doing it? Censorship propaganda. Who hasn't experienced that over the last few years, right? We've seen it time and time again. One thing I'll spend a few minutes on is autonomous weapons systems. Now, the U.S. has an autonomous weapons system is a weapon system designed to kill humans or military vehicles. That is it runs by itself. It uses AI. Once it's launched, it seeks out its target and destroys it. Okay, there's no human intervention. And for many years, in just war theory, we have said no, a human always has to be in the loop when it comes to the use of a weapon. The problem we're running into is some of our autonomous weapons, some of the weapons that the humans control and incorporate technology and AI, the human is actually the weak link in the decision. We have one weapon system that can, if let's say there is a terrorist, a legitimate target in a car in the back seat with his two children on either side, wife in the front, and a bodyguard driving, normally we would blow up the car and kill all 5 people. Now, this particular weapon system can hover, identify where the terrorist is, and go in and kill that terrorist without harming the children on either side. So my question is, doesn't that align better with just war theory than blowing up the car, like the human would do? I'm not an expert on just war theory, but I'm smart enough to ask questions that I like those experts to answer. I think it's the sort of thing we're going to have to deal with when it comes to AI. I think it's going to be very challenging for us. Okay? Lastly, I think I just killed my alarm. That's okay. Lastly is just large-scale governance formation. One of the problems with AI, as I've said, is the ability of a small number of people to control large numbers of people. I think this is a real danger to us. The ugly part is really around societal bifurcation. We've seen it with social media a lot. I think that if we're able to leverage the use of our human simulacrum, our AI, I wonder if the fact that if people actually have that simulacrum with them, that will enable a better connection, a better way of enabling or destroying this bifurcation, bringing us back to more of a community, more of a way of how we saw things years ago when we did live in communities. Because social media has completely, is doing a wonderful job in destroying that. Let's see. Catch up with quick note on sacramentality versus simulation. The human understanding of the human person, right? We avoid the extremes from the whole technophobia. And, you know, while humans can create sophisticated simulations, right, those don't equate to human mind. And our sacramental worldview recognizes the profound interplay between the physical and metaphysical, which the AIs don't. Okay? I think our intellectual tradition offers a helpful vantage point for discerning what makes us unique and how our sophisticated AI systems can enhance our uniqueness. The one thing I would say is that, you know how, you know, one thing, you know, I think like a lot of you, I remember Word on Fire, and one of the things they've talked about a lot is how St. John Henry Newman talks about, you know, that Scripture is an evolving study as we learn more and more about it with time. I think that one of the opportunities afforded us with our AI, our companion AI, is the ability to enhance that and accelerate that process of understanding Scripture more fully and in more unique ways. I also think that instead of having two people interact, having two people and two AIs interacting could be a very powerful way of advancing our knowledge, our understanding, and our community. Going forward, strangely enough, where I landed, I didn't think I'd land here. But where I landed, I think that Catholic social teaching is sort of the relevant framework for how we can think about using AI and advancing it within the Catholic Church, and advancing it for evangelization, and advancing it for the culture. And I think the big area is in subsidiarity. Where in subsidiarity, right, decision-making is centralized to the simplest competent social unit. Well, if that social unit now is instead of a collection of humans, it's a collection of augmented humans. That's a much more powerful picture, much more powerful capability. And I think the subsidiarity piece could be the origin, the genesis of how we start to move forward with AIs from a Catholic perspective. And there's still the human dignity side, right? AI should empower the vulnerable and marginal, not rob them of agency. Solidarity is these things, we should be brought together. Humans are inherently social and interdependent. That needs to be recreated. There we go. And of course, the common good is, if we're using AI in this way, authentic development will benefit all members of society. Just let me close with just sort of one thought. The Catholic Church likes to admire problems. There's a problem, they'll say, okay, yeah, thanks, we'll get back to you in 200 years. We don't have 200 years. If the church is going to, I think, survive and flourish in a society that is moving to using AI in a very evil and bad way, there needs to be some level of effort on our part to counter that. If we're going to evangelize against this, if we're going to evangelize against humanists who are using AI, if we're going to evangelize against evil using AI, then guess what? We need to use AI. And so we're going to have to figure out how that works, how that's going to happen, because we cannot, as a religion, I think, survive if we are not using the same tools as everyone else, but using them more effectively. And so since my simulacrum said my time is up, thank you very much. I guess everyone's asleep.
So I read Augusto de Noce's Crisis of Modernity, which is from the late 60s, early 70s. And he, towards the end of it, he warns about a fusion of the left, the godless left, and a technocratic right, so resulting in a rule by technocracy. And but has he written after that about the kinds of problems we're discussing here? Has he talked about AI?
No, he hasn't ever talked about AI. He talks about technology,
Yeah.
which is, it falls in that category. The latest book that was translated is A Problem with Atheism. Have you read that?
No, not yet.
Okay, that was a book came out last year that Carone translated. It's really difficult. But if you read Crisis of Modernity, you should be able to read this, and it's more foundational than Crisis of Modernity. So yeah, I took a lot of this out of there as well. Sure.
So I have this idea of, as we keep making progress technologically in, first we were focused on addressing people's material wants, their, need for food and clothing, housing. As we keep advancing in technology, sort of the amount of terrain that can be, then addressed, that people need fewer things. And so then they turn to more virtual places where, you don't need to look after your housing anymore. Now you need to be entertained. So now we're, looking into virtual reality and other things like that to entertain us, to help us determine what's good. So how can we look at those enduring needs of the human person and what technology can supply. Can we have AI tell us what's good in life? Is where it ends up
No.
going. Yes.
No.
How can we help people understand that?
Well, first of all, I think the metaverse is dead. I'm pretty sure that's probably not going to work out. We can't depend on technology to tell us what the right things to do are. We can depend on technology to inform us to a much greater extent to enable us to decide what the right thing is for us. And that's where I think the power comes in. We can become better informed, smarter, more, let's face it, I've become a far better programmer using ChatGPT than I would without it. Okay, more productive, more effective, I think. I think at the end of the day, it's more about the AI can make you a lot smarter and proficient and thoughtful. It gives you, try this exercise. If there's some PDFs, there's some articles in PDF format that you've been trying to read and are struggling with, give them to Claude, which is an AI, asking for a summary for a college freshman, and then read the summary, and it starts to help you to understand it. It's like having a professor, explain a difficult concept to you. It has to happen several times, and you have to try something different ways and so on, right? That's all this is. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes. So there have been some articles I've read about AI developing their own ethical frameworks and essentially making their own decisions about what is and isn't okay. I'm curious how Catholic scientists thought about how to deal with that as that continues to develop, especially since the church is often seen as a place of moral guidance.
The church is seen as a center of ethical guidance. Secular ethical guidance. That's how the technologists view the church. They're okay with us as long as we pretend we're secular ethicists. Now we're not, right? So I think we need to start becoming more prescriptive and assertive. There are Catholic scientists out there who are much better in AI than I am, who are far better positioned who are probably involved in these things. But I think there's sort of a genuine fear of bringing their Catholicism to the front. I think there needs to be more spine there. I think that needs to happen in a number of different areas. Because I think we have a great story to tell, not just from a religious, but also from a moral wisdom perspective that I think would enhance any of the guardrails that are out there. I will say this with no basis in statistics. I'm kind of starting to see this little change in people being atheist to kind of, okay with religion, maybe more agnostic. Right? There seems to be this, I don't know, again, completely my read on very non-statistical things. And maybe that they start to see the value in what we've been talking about for 2,000 years. If we can use that as a step into evangelization, and evangelizing our culture. Did that answer your question?
I don't know if you've read Computer Power and Human Reason by Joseph Weizenbaum.
No.
1975. He's talking a bit, not so much about AI, but using computers to make decisions. And so one of the big distinctions was that computers have no morality. They have no consequences for doing anything wrong. And they cannot be allowed to run human affairs. Whereas we've got morality, we may make the wrong decision, but we do suffer consequences. I think that's maybe one of the important things to consider. I don't define AI the way you did, but I appreciate your definition. And when you think about the computational statistics, if it makes a mistake and hurts someone, what do? You turn off the program. Well, the program's being reproducible infinitely. You can't turn it off.
Right.
There's no consequence for it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Now, I haven't read his book. There's another book by, I'm drawing a blank. It was written in the 70s, I think, more from a philosophical piece, but it talks about how computers simply can't. A similar conclusion. It was a different author. Yeah.
So you conclude essentially the need to incorporate these existing AI tools into the work of the church for all and evangelical work. How can you particular vision of how this can be accomplished with these, like a historical process of enculturation that happened with bringing pagan culture into the church, like that, which some completely different sort of vision for how we would incorporate these tools.
I think the best first step is, as we try to increase the number of evangelists, create an AI tool that will help them evangelize. Right. So we need, in my talk I gave it this summer, I talked about the need for a ChatGPT, a Catholic ChatGPT that could handle a Ask Me Anything on Reddit with all the people sending in questions and being very difficult. If we had something like that, I think we could actually ask questions like, what's the best way to evangelize the people in this company? Here are some people, here's what the company does. How would we evangelize the company? And let the AI figure it out, at least get some understanding or directions. It may be all wrong, but at least it's some ideas. And I think that just having that tool initially, I think it would make it easier for people to be evangelists. And I think it would be a far better experience for them too, because one is, you ask people to evangelize, it's like asking them to go door to door selling vacuum cleaners, right? So we have to give them confidence in ways of being able to do it. I think the focus model on campus is a particularly strong one for use in this way. But I think having that AI, that augmented human, is a powerful approach to evangelizing the culture. I think that's where I would start. If I was a billionaire and I wanted to fund something, that's what I would fund.
Maybe Bill Gates can help out.
Doubtful. Bill Gates stole some of my quote once about 35 years ago, so I don't like it.
So you've had several revolutions in the last couple hundred years, with the agricultural revolution, with the industrial revolution, and we've been living, it's called the last 40 years, of the information revolution. So do you consider this to be part of the information revolution, or do you consider this to be a completely new revolution called the AI revolution? What's your thought on
that? I think that this information revolution started in the 70s, late 70s, and is still going on. I think it's just part of it. One, because I don't have good clarity, I'm not smart enough to know for sure. I don't think it's separate. I don't think it's like, we've had our information, like the World Economic Forum. Oh yeah, now we have our fourth industrial revolution called AI. AI contains a lot of what we have done with hardware and software that enabled the information revolution. So I'm kind of hard pressed to think it's something significantly different. I think it's just, I actually think it's just one continual, I think we've reached the regime, let me put it this way. I think we've reached the point where instead of having these large episodic revolutions, our ability to innovate and create has gotten, the timescales are so short that we're just rapidly going from one revolution to the next, to the next, to the next. I don't think we're going to see these episodic steam engines, factories, automation, electricity, and information. We had 3 separate revolutions. I actually think we're in a continuing revolution. I'm not sure how to describe it other than I don't think it could be a separate entity. Hopefully that answers my question.
So I have a follow-on to it. So isn't a block in AI, it ultimately...
Isn't the what?
Isn't the ultimate flaw in AI that all this stuff is programmed by human beings? I mean, that's the big flaw, in that computers, yes, to a certain degree, there's machine learning, but ultimately, the logic that goes behind all this stuff is engineered by human beings. I do quantitative stuff on Wall Street, and most of it's, Chinese, Russian, Korean programmers that are taking very simplistic mathematical model type stuff to quote unquote do AI stuff, but it really isn't.
No, it's not.
So,
Yeah. I'm a trader too, so I know what you're talking about.
But like he was saying, like, oh, computers are going to take over the world. That's not the case. It's humans ultimately still control AI, right?
Absolutely, it's the humans that will take. The humans already control the world. The humans will either destroy, just like with nuclear weapons. Instead of using the word nuclear weapons, you can use AI. Same thing. If we can use AI to do good things or bad things. And you're right. I think we agree. I think that AI itself, it has just like a nuclear weapon can't go and detonate itself. It can't get up, walk to Russia, and then detonate itself, right? The human has to do it.
Yeah.
Human has to put it there. Same thing with us.
So if you were a teacher, okay, and you had kids in a class now, would you be teaching them on Chat GPT? So let me give you a simple example. I kind of stayed away from it. My partner got more into it. And recently we were doing some stuff where we were writing introductory letters, and then he gave it like a paragraph of like all of our businesses and stuff, and had Chat GPT go write it. And I was like blown away by it. I was like, oh my God. Like, I can't believe how good this really is.
Yeah.
And I had to edit maybe 10% of it, where there was like certain things the computer was doing that didn't really make sense. But it's an incredible productivity thing. I said to my partner, like, hey, we write 5 morning notes. Can we use this to do this? It'll make my life a lot better. It'll make my quality of life a lot better because I can just look at something that is taking all the data and analyze it. So how's this going to happen in schools?
So I use Chat GPT in all my classes. All right. For programming, I have found the productivity increase in programming to be absolutely substantial. What I can teach them to do in 2 weeks used to take 16. Okay. And which is fine. I think when it comes to programming, right, I think it's a good use of it. I think when it comes to creating architectures like designs of systems, like I need to implement analytics, like one of my classes right now, we're working on analytics service in the AWS cloud. And they're using Chat to help design that, right? I think that's great. I think that's fine. I think it's helpful because they have to know what to ask it, but then they have to validate it's correct, right? So they kind of let Chat do all the grunt work. Then they can sit and say, yeah, is this going to work? Is this going to be right? I don't know. Let me think through it, right? So I think it's fine. I think where I draw a line is with the creative piece, like when you're writing, you say you write your letters, like I know there's some traders I know, one guy I subscribe to, he's starting to experiment using chat to provide he used to have this fairly voluminous, trading ideas for the day, and now he's been summarizing it using chat. And he's just experimenting with it. And there's others doing the same thing, providing rapid turnaround summaries containing more information. I think you're going to see a lot more on the business side, using, say, Bloomberg Chat, GPT, their version of it. I also think people are going to be using it to try to look for ways of doing automated trading strategies, to test it out. But I try to get them to use it to augment their thinking, right? Because a lot of times they'll ask me questions they should know the answers to. And if I say to you know what, go sit down with chat, start a dialogue about solving a problem, tell me what you come up with. And invariably, they actually learn a lot more because they have to type the questions in, and they get responses, and they go back and forth, and then they come back with a summary that says, yeah, this is what I think I should do. And it's actually pretty good. So I see a lot of value in that. I don't see it, I guess, when it comes to replacing your thinking and your value systems. Hopefully that answers your question.
Part of me thinks for school, do we may go back to the blue book? I mean, quite honestly, if I was a teacher, I wouldn't let kids write papers anymore with ChatGPT. I'd say, coming into my class, you got an hour and a half to write your paper, and it's on a blue book. And we'll see how well you can actually write.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think it's going to be very easy to get around this whole thing if you're just, writing papers on the computer. Do you have thoughts on that? Do you think we go a step backwards, maybe, like back to the blue book?
So I teach technology classes. So for something like that, I think it depends on the question. I think if it's a sufficiently complex one, where the person, there may be benefit to allowing chat to help you create the answer, not generate the answer. That's a nuanced reply, I don't understand, but the idea is there a way to get them to write an answer that has been enabled by getting a lot more information, understanding through the use of chat versus chat actually writing it. I think we are seeing a resurgence in the blue book use. And also the respondus browser, which is sort of, a way of locking down a computer. I don't know. I think I'm starting to see some more discussions about how to address that problem without going retrograde. With allowing, people, they're going to use it. How do we allow them to use it such that it's not it's a output that hasn't been created by ChatGPT and it's not plagiarism? There's a lot I see discussions a lot, webinars, papers discussing all that, how to deal with cheating versus enabling them to just get smarter. So I don't, it's great questions. I have my ideas and thoughts, but it's not an easy, you're not asking easy questions. I should have paid you more money when I put you on it.
Yeah, in your schema you talked about the applications, and then you had the guardrails that help with the application, monitor the applications. So my question would be, how do you create ethical guardrails? So who's creating the guardrails? How are the content of the guardrails being established? How is it monitored, et cetera? So it's a great idea to have guardrails, but on a practical level, how do those emerge in an ethical way that don't have the problematic bias that you're concerned about?
So companies themselves are creating the guardrails, both internal to the model earlier on in that process, and then external to the model. And they're the ones making the decisions. They're employees. There are some frameworks out there that have very secular, ethical frameworks, which are good, right? There's nothing particularly wrong with them other than they don't reflect Catholic values, right, obviously. But we would still align with all of them. I think where it starts to get dicey is, do you consider what President Trump did on January 6th ethical or not? Now, some people say yes and some people say no. Who gets to decide that in the guardrail perspective, right? And it's going to be the company, and they're going to take a certain perspective. But that depends on whether or not you did they do the right thing or not. Well, that depends on whether or not you agree with what President Trump did. So I think that's where you start to run into problems, where you start to go from deviating from those values that we think we all align to those values that, there is going to be a clear disagreement on amongst, 350 million people. I don't think we show up well. I think we show up, like I said before, like secular ethicists. I just think we need to throw our weight around more.
Dr. Carone, thank you. So you had mentioned during the course of your talk that the amount of energy required to run these AIs is so massive that companies like Microsoft are looking to possibly integrate small level nuclear reactors, correct? Do you see this as having like a weight one way or the other in the conversation about energy and conservation of resources that we as Catholics should be attuned to, at having a weight one way or the other? And as maybe a threshold for us to talk about these things across science.
Yeah. Well, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you want AI to do all this great stuff and help us out and those things, you can't do it with wind and solar. Okay? Pick your poison. Are you okay with? Still many of our power plants are driven by oil, gas, and coal. Okay? And that's not going to. That slowly changes. That we need more electricity. The best way to get it is by using coal, oil, and gas. And unless we start building nuclear reactors. So I think it's not part of this technocratic paradigm that the Pope Francis talks about in Laudato Si. In fact, we need more electricity. We need more electricity because it benefits the humankind to have this stuff. Question is how best do we do it? In the near term, it's stuff we don't want to use, but we have to. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, is it safe to assume that all of the images that you have shown us tonight have been AI generated?
Yes, all of them.
Okay, so here's my question. As a designer and as an artist, you're talking a lot about how ChatGPT is working for writing. At what point does it become the artist versus the person who inputs the things? Because I can type in anything I want and I should be able to claim that as my intellectual property, but I didn't actually do a thing. Right. Did I? Where is that line drawn?
That's a great question. I don't. All I did was type in the prompts, like you said, and I said, use the style of Caravaggio, my favorite artist, and a few other things. And it'll generate them, as many as I want. I don't know who owns these. I'm sure they're not gonna copyright them, they're just, But in the world where people make a living on this stuff, with imaging, art, writing, drama, poetry, I'm kind of worried those people are gonna be out of a job. I really do. I mean, so one of the first things I did when I started using chat, I said ChatGPT, I said, there's a long prompt, but basically develop a synopsis of a story where one priest destroys a Roman Catholic Church. It was longer than that, but boy, was it a great story. Oh my God, this Irish priest brought the whole thing down. So I can see where content creators are in serious trouble. I also think actors are in serious trouble, which I feel less bad about. But yeah, I think content creators have a real. It's going to get to the point where I can give it a whole. I can start off with a small prompt to get the storyline, to get the script, to get the video, and the movie and the characters and everything. We're not far from that. And depending on who you are, that's either a good thing or not a good thing.
I guess on the flip side of that, I work at a company where we are trying to use AI in our products, but we are not allowed to use it internally for coding or anything else because of intellectual property concerns and HIPAA and stuff like that. So kind of like, I mean, there's that concern that people could be out of a job, but also like, do you want to use ChatGPT? Because then other people, like, how do you see that?
I think we're going to need some legal, what the lawyers call when you have to have a bunch of legal cases adjudicated to make decisions. I'm sorry, what?
Case law.
Case law, thank you. I think we're going to need to have a whole bunch of case law to answer these questions. I don't think our regulatory framework currently can support this, is my sense, and I think it's going to take a decade or more for that to work its way out. In which case, by the time that happens, the technology will have just flown right past it. So,
Yeah, to your remark about ChatGPT for coding, because I do software in an industrial setting, and in my experience, like the first thing I haven't actually used it. I'm not like radically opposed to ever using it, but the first thing I drew a parallel to was like Stack Overflow, Stack Exchange, all that stuff. When that came out, that's sort of the first stage of augmented intelligence. Is now I can, instead of being like, oh, what was that stupid algorithm I can't remember? Oh yeah, just how do I do this? Here's the answer. Pop it up, paste in the code. And it's like it is really transformative for a certain amount of things. And like I have a cousin who does he's sort of statistics and physics and stuff. And a lot of that sort of work, it does tend to be like in an academic environment and learning too. It's really good. It gets you the answers there fast.
Yeah.
But I've found in my experience that most good stuff does not really get created that way for an industrial product. Like I've worked with a lot of people who have a hard time getting beyond that.
Well, I'll tell you why. One of the reasons, a lot of the code, the reason these systems can produce code is because they consume GitHub and Stack.
Yeah.
I think Stack now allows them, right? Which doesn't contain like specific industrial code for specific industrial products to any degree. So no, it's sort of like GitHub doesn't contain a lot of Excel macro code. Therefore, these things really stink at writing Excel macro code. They're not very good. I prove that over and over again. But that's because there's not a lot of Excel macro code out on GitHub or Stack Exchange. So the stuff you're talking about doesn't surprise me because there's not a lot of it out there to train the models.
Well, yeah, and I ramble a little bit, but the one thing I was trying to get at here is I know also that a lot of stuff now is like you get a bunch of things from GitHub, from like the open source sort of
community and all that sort of thing, which is a little bit of an anomaly. And I guess the one of the things I wonder about is like a lot of this stuff, including with design, it depends on like draining the well, so to speak. Like, you know, it's like some of this stuff I see it and it just feels like, what's it gonna look like when it's feeding it on itself? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I use it purely for teaching purposes, right? You know, how to write Python code that you can put into GitHub, that you can then promote into, you know, using GitHub Action to promote into creating a CI/CD pipeline for database analytics processes in the cloud and all that, and it works great for students. It helps them understand complex stuff. You know, all that kind of cool jargon I just spewed off. Not that I know what I'm talking about, but I didn't make it up. Yeah. Right. Those complex things, it can explain it, it can help them understand it, right? But when I actually use it in production, right? When I was consulting, when I've used chat in my work to implement an SAP system globally for a Fortune 100 company, no, I wouldn't have had it writing code, because I think that at that point, you know, there is no replacement for the traditional way of doing it. It helps, maybe it enhances the training process so you can bring people on board quicker and faster, you know, in terms of coding and other stuff. But I don't see it as a replacement for production environments and supporting production environments. Though I have been hearing the outsourcers in India and other places are starting to use chat to generate the code for doing production maintenance, which I think is really dangerous. So hopefully I answered your question.
Oh, yeah.
What is OpenAI? Who is Sam Altman, and why does Google think I care that his board fired him on Friday?
So OpenAI was originally created by Elon Musk as a way of doing safe AI. His original.
He's getting re-employed right now, just so you know.
Yeah, no, yeah. They're bringing him back. I was going to get to that. Yeah. I think the employees basically said, well, if he doesn't come back, we'll all leave him. I think that's what happened, if I'm not mistaken. And then they realized, oh no, this thing could actually make money. But this is a nonprofit for doing safe AI. Yeah, but we can make, you know, some. So they have this fairly, I'll say unusual, but different organizational corporate structure with a board and a nonprofit, but also this profit center. And, you know, he's a smart guy. I think he was at Google, maybe. I think, you know, but I wasn't obvious to me, but they fired him because of lack of communication in terms of the Microsoft investment, maybe, and a few other things they weren't happy about. They fired him, but then the employees said, no, he's got to come back, or we're going to do his new company, because he's threatened to start a new company. It sort of sounds like a tempest in a teapot for right now. I think by after Thanksgiving, it'll all be, you know, history that nobody remembers. Is my guess. I don't know. Do you have an opinion about it?
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I think it's just,
I think you're correct in what you said earlier, though. There's going to be 4 major players in this. It's going to be Microsoft. It's going to be Google. IBM's been discounted beyond belief about it. I don't think Meta/Facebook is going to end up being a big player in it, but I think that NVIDIA will, because they're the processor and they've got the capability. They're going to go from being just a processor to being content creator too.
So you think they would capture their hardware and force others to go their own hardware route?
Yeah, and they'll develop some software out of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Because this is all about the capability of how quickly you can calculate stuff.
Yeah, and how valuable the calculations are to different people. I mean, have you used that Bloomberg chat yet?
Yeah, I'm a Bloomberg user, and our data is on Bloomberg, so I've worked with Bloomberg since 1990.
Have you used
It's
their,
a pretty long time.
right, have you used their ChatGPT version?
I didn't use their ChatGPT. Basically, the way that Wall Street kind of talks to each other is through what's called Bloomberg IV.
Right.
And you have your different chat groups that you talk with people about stuff, but not the Bloomberg ChatGPT thing.
Yeah, I haven't been able to find anybody who's really used it for day-to-day stuff yet, so I've been curious to see if I can find, I haven't been able to find anybody.
The Bloomberg terminal itself is like antiquated.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I've used,
It's
yeah.
like 30 years old. It's horrible.
And its commands are still 30 years old, it's like
Yeah.
stupid, you know, I agree.
Yes. So in follow-up to my friend and colleague in art and design, as a fellow artist and designer, I know there's been a lot of studies over the decades showing how humans interact with materials, looking for similarities to human face. There's things like with technologies where things, if they are too real, are very off-putting to the point of no understanding, okay, this is not real. And many of the images produced by AI, such as the ones you shared tonight, are very well done. But is there a point at which AI is poised then to overtake and to outmode the human hand of the artist? Because I mean, there are many images where you can look at AI and it's showing, and you can tell that something was not as much created by the human hand. So how is that necessarily impacted, I guess? I mean, how much is AI poised to completely overtake the human hand's involvement?
I can't give you a date, but there will be a date when that happens.
Okay.
I really do think that it will become better at content creation than humans. I don't know if that's a year out or 10 years out or 30, I really don't. But the fact it's come this far so quickly, I can't believe we've hit a wall. It's just, and I think when it comes to the content creation, even when it comes to things like Broadway plays, musicals, music itself, right? I'm a huge opera fan. Yeah, I think most of the opera written in the last 50 years is not very good, but that's just me. I'd love it if an AI did something really good, finally. It comes to music as well. You run into the same issue. It's just a matter of time. And, there's going to be case law around it, who owns it. If an AI writes it, right, writes a hit song, who gets the royalties?
The producers.
I don't know. It's just, probably. I'm sure whoever typed the prompt in is going to claim the royalty. So I think it's a matter of time. And I don't take any joy in saying that, by the way. Yeah.
Money is so temporary, and I'm really more concerned with the church as a source of moral guidance in the age of AI and at the end of modernity. My daughter went to Madison Public Schools. Everything was done to disabuse her of her faith and the moral teachings that we imparted to her. And one thing that happened was in high school, she was given a book to read called The Giver by Lois Lowry. She thinks so much of this book, she gave me a copy of it to read. And I skimmed it. It was fairly obvious that what this community had done was to find some wise old man who they thought was the smartest and most experienced, and then they would ask questions of this wise old man. So the old man became a substitute for God. And so that would be a bad direction for the church to head in, I would think. On the other hand, when I was teaching at Platteville in the early 2000s, I stopped by the Catholic on-campus ministry, And the priest had behind him a whole shelf full of books, 3 dozen at least, on various topics about how to live as a Catholic. And so the priest could either crack open the book or give it to a student to read, and that it would explore some part of living as a Catholic, not as a secular humanist. So what if you took the Catechism of the Catholic Church, Augustine, Aristotle, and crammed them into an AI model that you could then ask questions about how to live?
So they've done that. It's called magisterium.com, I think.
Oh, sorry.
Isn't that right? Have you all heard about this? Magisterium.com. So magisterium.com is, it takes all the public domain Catholic information, and I stress public, as far as I know, it's all public domain, and does exactly that. You can ask questions about what is transubstantiation, you know, what's the church teaching on gay marriage, or some more arcane theological question, right, that draws upon Aquinas and others. Magisterium.com can do that. The problem is that it's based on public domain data. So there's no Word on Fire data. You know, any of the books from Word on Fire, any of the videos or things from the Thomistic Institute, right? No books by Peter Kreeft. And, you know, just go down the line of, in the past 50, 60 years, all the great apologists we've all been reading, you know, Ed Fazer and others, none of that is in Magisterium, which is a huge gap in my opinion.
Oh yeah, that sounds like a solvable problem.
Yeah, I don't know, I'm not an expert on the copyright law. I'd like to think they might want to donate it to Magisterium for use, since we wouldn't be able to read their book in Magisterium, but at least it would be able to create models based on their content. So yeah, I would like to think it's a solvable problem. If all that content got in there, then I think we would have a really great AI to help us with evangelization and training of others. All right, we'll stop it there probably, but thank you all again very much.